Swagatam, Vanakkam. I am Rajesh Govindrajulu here with Professor P. Kanagasabapati, an eminent academician and economic thinker. And we are going to look at his book and have a dialogue with him, and also going to listen with him over the next 45 minutes to an hour or so. The book is Prosperous India. And let me introduce Professor Kanagasabapati to you. First of all, dear friends, I wish to say that I have known Professor for several years and also always used to meeting him in person or talking over the telephone. This is the first time that I am seeing him online as an individual conversing with him. Professor P. Kanagasabapati is a professor involved in the study of Indian economic, social, business and management systems from the native perspective. He holds a doctorate obtained as a UGC Research Fellow, a very special doctorate. One of his books, entitled Indian Models of Economy, Business and Management, is considered a pioneering initiative towards Indianizing the economic and management education in our country, and has been recommended as a text cum reference book in reputed institutions and universities. He has written a number of books and numerous articles, papers in different publications. His works highlight the fundamental strengths of India and emphasizes the need for India-centric approaches. And his work has yielded results in places like faraway Gujarat and elsewhere. I welcome you, sir, today, and it is my good fortune to interact with you on behalf of the verandaclub.com, and we are like what Professor likes, using the native app Vyam for this interaction. Professor also has been part of Swadeshi Jagran Manch, SJM, along with a number of intellectuals like Sri Gurumurthy, and also he's good friends with a number of other professors and leading economists who include Professor R. Vaidyanathan. And it was thanks to Professor Kanagasabapati that I met Professor Vaidyanathan a few years ago and got the opportunity to know more about his work also. Before we start, I would like to add a few words with regard to at least one or two activities connected with Professor Kanagasabapati. See, many years ago, while our Prime Minister was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, a professor and his friends did a study of the kite festival in Gujarat and came up with the coffee table book afterwards. When they started the study, the turnover was only 35 crores for that segment, and there were mostly Muslims involved in the business. And today, the volume in less than 15 years has crossed 1,000 crores of rupees. In the matter of the first few years only, it crossed 350, then steadily went up to 850, and then it has crossed 1,000 crores. So this kite study is an important study. Besides this, Professor has studied a number of clusters. In this book, I understand that he has listed 2,042 clusters throughout the country. A cluster can include an art or a craft or a small-scale industry or a cottage industry. It can be from a set of mat makers like the Pattamadai Pattupai, where the Lebbai Muslim community are involved, to the people who are producing sculptures at Swami Malai, the bronzes like Nataraja and other bronzes, to the financing capabilities and entrepreneurship of people at Karur, at Erode, at Pallivalayam, and at Tirupur. He has written numerous essays, given innumerable number of speeches, has actively involved himself with the cause of our country for a number of decades. And I must definitely say this book is written very, very well. When somebody told me that how will you read this book in a very short period of time, I said I have the ability to understand Professor's work very well because I know him for a number of years. So when I read the book, I felt as though he was dictating notes to me and talking to me, because over the years he has given a lot of this information. He has told us, you look at this cluster, this is how it is working. If you go there, this is how it is working. This is the community which is involved. These are the MSME segment people who need to be supported. This is how you can give a loan for them. And Professor and his teammates only were responsible for the Mudra loan scheme today, which is in which Tamil Nadu is the biggest beneficiary, I can definitely say. And he has taken painstakingly done a study of numerous books. I think though this book is only 160 pages, but at least 100 books would have gone inside this book, is my opinion. Over the years, what Professor has done is he has prepared condensed milk and he has given it to us in the form of this book. And it is a very easy read. Anybody will be able to understand. He has made life very easy. And under various headings, he has not left anybody out. The Prime Minister's vision, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, that complete inclusiveness can be seen in this compilation. This compilation has been published by Vivekananda Kendra Prakashan Trust, located at Chennai, and it was published in 2013. And the book talks about our culture, our society, our economics, and how it was in the earlier period, how it was in the middle period, how it was in the colonial period, and what happened thereafter, what happened after the independence, what went right when, what went wrong when, what was responsible for it to go wrong, what was responsible for it to function in a rightful manner, and what is required to make India the next superpower economically. All these tips and all these legacies are beautifully brought out. This is like, a low-hanging fruit which is in front of our eyes. And I am only reminded of Swami Sukhabodhananda after reading this book. In his speeches, the great and famous Swamiji used to say, there are 700 verses in the Bhagavad Gita. And every time I take one verse and I talk about the verse, read and explain. And sometimes when I'm in the 235th verse, there could be a person who began with me from the first verse and came to 235. There are people who heard in between here and there. There are people who have read only, come to me few times, and there could be many first timers. So as far as I'm concerned, all these sets of people should find it relevant when I start my discourse today or when I present myself today. Similarly, when we look at these 26 chapters in the book, any chapter that you touch is sufficient to get you to the bigger picture. Of course, like the Bhagavad Gita, you have to read it fully. But you will not feel bad that you touched the 13th chapter without reading the first chapter. You can still enjoy that wealth. You can come from the front or go from the back, and still the work is very relevant. And that is the good work of this professor, mainly because he is a teacher, academician, and a mentor to a number of students. I've had the opportunity to meet several of his friends, and they swear by him. They come from faraway places, they meet him. In fact, they seek his blessings on all good occasions. And the book is only a testimonial to all that. Some of his students have also worked with Professor in this book, and he has gracefully acknowledged their role also. And he has given all the references and bibliography extensively. Those bibliographical references will help people who are following this book to use better material and make themselves better. See, he's spoken about Indian traditions, superior agriculture and thrust on food production since ancient times, culture of self-employment in India. We are often, sir, when we see any economic activity, where is the employment? How many people have been employed? How many are getting PF? How many are getting ESI? what does the employment exchange say? And immediately they will say, we are not harvesting the demographic dividend, and the government in the last 7-8 years has not provided employment. But when we look at the data given by our respectable professor, the number of Mudra loans have made people into entrepreneurs, and they are in turn employing a few people, each one of them. And many of these people have become very big. Some of them are employing thousands of people, and some are employing up to 10, 20, 5, 7. So if you give a crore of Mudra loans, automatically 10 crore people are employed. This will not be found in your employment register in the government department, but will reflect itself in income tax and GST collections. And that is true. When we see the GST collections, they are going up. So professor has, taken a lot of interest in doing this. He may as well, become a vice chancellor of a university or done something else. But he has chosen to give up some of the rosy opportunities that he may have strewn upon over the years and taken a life which is backed by intent and integrity. In fact, even for people who don't know him very well, but still the feedback is they will come and say, I heard that your professor is a man of integrity and that he's an honest and sincere person. And only such an honest and sincere person will be able to produce this kind of a good quality, because it comes from experience and right from the heart. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us today. I am really happy and grateful. And you have spoken about I was so happy to see this word, Dilmun civilization of Bahrain and Kuwait. We know Kuwait and Bahrain as modern countries. So I want to, ask Professor in this interaction, what made you choose this path of creating enormous material connected with Indic knowledge, and also doing research and producing essays and books? What motivated you, sir?
Yes, thank you very much, Sri Rajesh ji. I congratulate the Veranda Club, Sri Rajesh and Sri Jagannathan, for doing an excellent job. Meeting with the, engaging with the Indic authors, and then explaining their studies, asking them to talk to different groups of people. It's an opportunity which we cultivate this Indic thoughts. This is very important. So my congratulations to both of you. See, as far as choosing this path is concerned, and as you know better, nothing is in our hand, it's God's desire. Like all the other modern educated people, I also chose stock market for my PhD thesis in the late 1980s. So I submitted the thesis, got my PhD. In fact, I was the second PhD in stock market in India in 1991. So at that time, I believed that only the Western American theories would be helpful for India. So during 1990-91, when Sri Narasimha Rao became the Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Finance Minister, he introduced many changes. And one of the changes was, in promoting many stock exchanges. So when they promoted stock exchanges, they needed some educated people to go and talk to the allied sections of the society, and they chose I'm one of them. So I went to different parts of South India, particularly Tamil Nadu, to explain the virtues of investing in stock market. So when I went there and spoke to them, I came to realize that not many of them, in fact, most of them were not at all interested in investing stock markets. At that time, I was thinking that, how are we going to come up as a nation economically when our own people are not interested in stock market? This was the position. This was in my mind. But suddenly, due to some circumstances, um, my native village people asked me to be the president of an agricultural cooperative bank. It was to help the people in our locality, two panchayats, about 20, 21 villages. So I was unanimously elected as a president, even though I was a professor, college teacher in PhD College of Technology, Institute of Management. So when I went there, I learned the biggest lesson of my life. When I went there, the deposits in the bank was just 22 lakhs. But within 1 year and 3 months, the deposits crossed 5 crore rupees. It gave me an important lesson, in the sense, when we were going to different parts of Tamil Nadu earlier, 5 years back, talking to the elite sections, asking them to invest money in stock, almost nobody responded. But here in a group of villages, without me asking people to deposit money, they deposited money. And the Coimbatore District Central Cooperative Bank CEO came and told me, sir, in your bank, so much of money is coming, so you should tell the people not to deposit because you will not be able to service. That was the position. Then I realized that in India, people don't, believe in theories or many institutions. People believe in people. So that was the first lesson that the society taught me. Then we started moving to different districts of Tamil Nadu, taking my own students, MBA students from PhD College of Technology, to see how people in Tamil Nadu save money. Because in those days, whenever we go to the classrooms, we always teach, India less saving, people don't save money, India cannot progress at all. But when we went on a tour to collect details, we came to know that all Indians, almost all of them, save money. Only thing in those days, not all of them were depositing money in banks, but they were saving in one way or other. Some depositing money in cooperative banks, some giving it to their own respected people in their villages, or some keeping it with themselves. This was the position, but almost everybody saved. So this was my first lesson. Then I started moving to other parts of Tamil Nadu initially. So when we went and asked them about the financial position, then they told us, sir, we are saving money for entrepreneurial activities, for my daughter, etc., etc. So the study got expanded to entrepreneurship, then family culture, etc., etc. Then we met the noted thinker and one of the most important persons who has understood the Indian economics very clearly, Shri Gurumurthy, and he advised me to go to other parts of India as well. At that time, we in the Swadeshi Academic Council, a team of friends, then we went to the other parts of the country. In 2001, we went on our first tour for about 20 days. We visited 5 states, going to Gujarat, Punjab, etc. So that gave us a lot of inputs. And after that, we started going to different parts of India. And as you mentioned, in 2003, our Prime Minister invited the Swadeshi Academic Council to study the kite business, and we were able to contribute something to the development of kite business in Gujarat. And after that, we went on to different states of India, particularly the economic clusters, industrial, business, and agricultural clusters. Then only we realized that this is a different type of country. In fact, when one goes into the field and then starts studying India, then we will understand a different India. Because whatever subjects that we teach in classrooms, if you take as a finance teacher, I teach only the American theories, Western theories, which are no longer useful to the students, even to the teachers, except, it gives them employment. So we started studying India. A different India appeared before us. Then we thought, we should explain it to the different groups of people. That is how I started, explaining this to different group of people. Then I thought, why don't we include it as a subject? Because we see a completely different India. So that is how in 2007, I introduced a new subject called Indian Economic and Business Models in Anna University, perhaps for the first time in the country, completely based on our field studies. So there was no book for that. I had to write the book. So that is how I wrote the Indian Models of Economy, Business and Management. Immediately it became a hit because Professor Vaidyanathan of IIM Bangalore introduced it. Then after the 2-3 years, Sri Gurumurthy ji began to teach the same subject in IIT Mumbai, and this is how it became popular. And during that period, Sister Nivedita, who is the vice president of Vivekananda Kendra, she told me, you are going to different educational institutions in the country, speaking to educated people, students, academics, etc. But you give the same ideas, almost same ideas without much data to the common readers in India, so that they also will be able to understand Indian economy, Indian society better. So that is how I started writing for Vivekananda Kendra publication. She told me, you every month you read, you take up a topic and write it. So that is how I wrote it. And after about 26 topics, then they said, sir, we are going to print it in the form of a book. And that is how this book came. It's just 160 plus pages. And now it is being published in different languages. In fact, Malayalam version is going to come in the next few days. So the idea about India changed me after my field studies. After I began to study, then I understood a different kind of India that is there in the functioning at the ground level. So whether it is finance, whether it is marketing, whether it is entrepreneurship, or even society, or even women, different kind of system appeared. So this is what we call functioning Indian systems or functioning Indian models. Even today, in spite of the Western impact, even today, in spite of the Western theories being pushed for about 65 years after independence, we have our own functioning systems, functioning models at the ground level. So whether it is financial model or entrepreneurial model or economic model or social model, family model, everything is there. So that is how I became a fan of India. And India is a great country. Bharat is a great country. So in spite of all the difficulties that lasted for about 1,000 years, particularly the 200 years of British rule, completely decimated Indian economy, business, society. But even after that, India rose as a nation within a period of just 7 decades. Nowhere in the world economic history, this has happened. At the time of independence, we were a very poor country. In fact, the average age of life, Indians' life expectancy was just 32.1 years. 18% was the literacy rate. More than 80% of the people were dependent on agriculture and rural activities. But we see today, we are the third largest economy in the world in PPP terms, with a GDP more than $10 trillion. We are the fastest growing economy this year with 9.2% growth. A few years back, London Business School had estimated that we have 85 million entrepreneurs, 8.5 crores, perhaps the highest number in the whole world. And all the global research bodies, multilateral agencies, they unanimously say that India is the most potential power in the world. How did it happen in a period of just 7 decades? That too for about 60-65 years. Always the macroeconomic approaches were alien. For about 30-35 years, we were forced to follow socialism. Then globalization, both failed in their own birthplaces. But in spite of them, India has been going up, moving forward. Why? What is the reason? This is a great country. There is unique functioning systems here because of our culture, because of our tradition, because of our civilization. So this is the reason that motivated me to start studying and continue to engage with our society during the last 27-28 years.
Sir, and very interestingly, you have given very good data. Like, when did they start using the drill plow or the kalapai? The drill plow, which we see in the hands of Krishna's elder brother Balarama,
Yes.
has been used in India for thousands of years. And I was surprised to see it was introduced only 400 years ago in Europe, not
Yes.
even 400.
Not even 400.
So, and the output of paddy in Tamil Nadu in the delta has been between 15 to 18 hectares, even 1,000 years before.
Yes.
Fantastic delivery.
Yes.
In fact, according to Diodorus Siculus, you have stated, it is confirmed that famine has never visited India and that there has never been a general scarcity in the supply of nourishing food.
Yes.
So many details, like self-employment being the basis of economic activity, and because of self-employment being the active reason, invasions did not deter us from surviving. Suppose if we were dependent on somebody for our job, rightfully, like what you have said, if the company is closed, we will lose our job. Since at our own level, we were skilled individually to do things and survive, we were not in need of an organization to survive. Taking the clue from the old hunter-gatherer who could survive alone, the Indian still had the same ethos. He or she could survive alone. So that I found that to be very enlightening. And also, you have spoken about an economic census 2005. Today, people are asking for caste census, this census, that census, but no one ever talks about the sensible economic census. They want employment census, but you have spoken about the economic census, and that is very, very interesting. You have spoken about the superior performance of Indian economy since ancient times. India's share of international GDP has been 32.9% in the first millennium. And Indian thought was very fertile and fantastic with a lot of creativity. But after the fall of Sindh in 713, the northwest started becoming weaker. And then after the fall of northern states post Gori and during the slave dynasty, though the economy was good, innovations were slowing down. Since there was no industrial revolution in the rest of the world, we managed to survive. And once it came, it hit us. So ideally, had India not been invaded by the Central Asian Seljuk Turks or by the Arabs, it would have been, I think the Indian GDP would have been 10 times equal to the rest of the world put together. And your work is only confirming this thought process that is there in my mind. And it is very difficult to come to this thinking. It is not easy because, sir, all of us while growing up were, fully drilled with only socialism, and business was a very bad word. Everybody had to be dependent only on the government, and whatever the Central Planning Commission did was correct, and whatever we did was wrong. We were made to go through pangs of guilt. And when you began speaking all these things, today it is different. But when you began speaking all this about 20 years ago, this dialogue must have been a rarity.
Yes. In fact, I remember when I wrote this textbook, first textbook, Indian Models, the original title was Indian Economic, Business and Management Models. I thought when the book is published, it should be from some top publisher. So at that time, for management books, there were two important publishers, Tata McGraw-Hill and then Prentice Hall of India. Tata McGraw-Hill somehow refused, and even PHI, when I gave it to them, they took more than 6 months, and the referee said, where are Indian models? How can you say that there are Indian models? It's very difficult to believe. Even the academics did not accept it. Then that is the reason why I had to change the title from Economic, Business and Management Models to Models of Economy, Business and Management. This was the position. Even today, if you see, OECD has conducted a study that you quoted, and it was published in 2001, which says that India was the top most economic power during the beginning of the common era, 2021 years back, with a contribution of 32.9% of global GDP. And India and China always followed us. These were the top two countries. And India remained as the topmost economic power, or one of the two powers, for almost 85% of the time in the last 2 millennia. But even if you see today the textbooks, economic textbooks, not many of them write about it. It was published in 2001. Even after 21 years, this is the situation. Till 10, 15 years back, even many of the economic professors did not know about it. So this is the level of our understanding of the contemporary Indian economic system. Rajesh ji, if you permit, I would like to mention a few important points. And after that, you can. As far as the study of Indian economy and society is concerned, I want to make some about 10 important points, because this is very important. I want the viewers of Veranda Club to understand it. Then we can, if necessary, we can have discussion. One, India always remained prosperous. Most of the time, almost always remained prosperous. It is not just in terms of wealth, but in terms of arts, in terms of culture, knowledge systems, whether you take architecture, mathematics, science, chemistry. So India always remained in prosperity. That is how Indians aspired for everything. And here, one important point that we have to note in the modern context is sustainability. You take the Western powers today, in the last 300, 400 years, no economy, no society remained powerful or prosperous for more than a century. No. Because they remained power for some time and then they completely failed. You take Great Britain, or you take Spain and Portugal earlier. You take America now. 1913, it emerged as the topmost economic power. We know now the position of America. Every day, America borrows $3 billion in the financial markets, not just for building roads, not just for making factories, but to maintain their social family systems. So that is the most indebted country in the world today. But you see India remained as the most prosperous nation for centuries together. Of course, for millennia, before 2000 years, we don't have GDP growth rate details. But for the last 2000 years, we have details. That too, the details provided by OECD study. So everybody accepts it. We are the most sustainable power. That means we must have had something. When we say India's GDP was 32.9% during the beginning of the common era, India could not have emerged suddenly most prosperous. That means several centuries of efforts must have gone into it before that. So India must have remained as a very active country for at least several millennia. We don't know how much. So this point we have to remind. So we have the mantra to function as a sustainable power. Then the third important aspect when we study Indian economy and society is, while India emphasized prosperity, because always our scriptures, our rishis, they asked us to engage in one or other economic activities. At the same time, our rishis, our jnanis, our scriptures taught us to be content. So one side prosperity, other side contentment. So that is the reason why India remained prosperous. Western societies don't have it. Fourth, of course, we were prosperous, but prosperity is not at the cost of others. You see any Western society, prosperity has always been at the cost of others. Even the contemporary American society, they are prosperous. But, through their multinational corporations, there are several kinds of unwanted exploitative things going on. But India remained prosperous, not at the cost of others, but due to her own efforts. And the fifth important aspect is Here, I have to mention this important point: cultural continuity. These contemporary studies of ours of the past almost 30 years now says that culture is behind our economic activities. You see, in India today, the saving rate is 31.2% last year, official data. For the last 15 years, it remains more than 30%. You take America, you take Europe, Western countries, so-called richer countries, they are in single digits. Why? Why do Indians save money? Every father, every mother feels that it is their duty to save as much money as possible so that their children can live comfortably. So this is culture. Culture is behind everything. Whether you take entrepreneurship, whether you take anything, you see culture. Even the foreigners who come and study the business systems, they see culture behind it. I remember this Kellogg Business School professors, Peter Kimperley and others, they came here to study the leadership pattern of Indian corporates. You remember corporates? We have a feeling that corporates always function on the basis of Western approaches. No, in India, every Western idea is Indianized here. So after meeting about 98 top chief executives of both public sector and private sector companies, they wrote a book, they wrote an article and book. The article appeared in Harvard Business Review in 2010. What is the title of that article? Leadership Lessons from India. So in that article, they say leadership pattern India is completely different because of its society and culture. So culture is the basis, and it is the same culture that was responsible for keeping India as a powerful country for thousands of years. And after repeated attacks on us, after we got independence, again it is the culture which is taking us forward. So this cultural continuity can be seen. And the next important aspect is that we always, Indian society always lived peacefully, and it tried to help others if possible, but never it attacked anybody, never it disturbed anybody. No. And the next important aspect that we have to understand is whatever we discuss in classrooms, textbooks, conferences, media, books, almost completely based on Western notions. This we have to change it. In India, we have everything. We normally earlier till at least 5-10 years back, all management schools used to teach there is no entrepreneurship in India, but there is enormous entrepreneurship in India. You quoted earlier economic census. Now in India, if you take small businesses alone, there are more than 63 million, 6.3 crore small businesses that provide employment to almost more than 123 million people, more than 12.3 crore people. It is the largest provider of employment to India. So these are all promoted by the ordinary sections of India with almost no financial background, with lesser educational background. So it is the drive that is helping the people, helping the economy to grow. This we have to understand. Similarly, we say there is no innovation. There is a lot of innovation taking place. A few years back, Department of Science and Technology mentioned 30% of the innovations in India take place through what we call illiterates. So the very ordinary people of this country, they have enormous business wisdom. They have enormous economic wisdom. That is why Professor C.K. Prahalad and Professor Mashelkar, one of the two great minds of modern India, they wrote an article in Harvard Business Review on innovation, comparing the innovative practices taking place across India in what they called as third world countries earlier. In that article, they say that it's only in India that we make innovations for the masses, people, at the cheapest cost. So here, innovations are taking place. We ourselves have documented some of them. The way we look at our families, our societies, our mothers, sisters, completely different. I remember one NCEAR study, National Council for Applied Economic Research, that I have quoted in the Prosperous India book, which says that in about 69% of the families, 15 years back when the data was collected, only one person is earning money. It is male member 69% of the family, almost 90-95% male member. He is earning money, but he spends money for the rest of the family. He is not earning money for himself. It is for the entire family as a whole. So in India, nobody thinks that the money earned by the earner belongs to him or her. So that is for the family. In fact, when they rated, why they save money, the third reason was for their old age. And before that, they said, for our children, we have to earn money. So this is India, completely new India. Similarly, when we go and meet the entrepreneurs, whenever we ask them, what is the reason for your success? All of them say it is family. They also particularly mention the role of women, mothers, grandmothers, sisters, wives, all of them mention. We have heard hundreds of stories like that. We studied hotel industry in Tamil Nadu some 15 years back. Arya Bhavan, Ananda Bhavan, Vasanta Bhavan hotel owners promoted by a particular community in Tamil Nadu. You will be surprised to know, we were surprised. 21% of the hotel owners said the initial capital came to us through the help of our married sisters. So sisters after their marriage goes to the in-laws house, nudge their husbands to give money to the brothers. So this is how Indian economy is functioning today. And the role of mothers, grandmothers, whom we all call very ordinary people, enormous amount. So it is due to their sacrifice, dedication, this economy is growing. So this is another important aspect. And the next aspect that we noted when we study Indian economy is its resilience. It gets attacked by an invader or a foreigner or a colonial power. Again, within a few years, it comes back. Nowhere at the global stage you see such a country like India. So as a result, our models are unique, whether it is our economic model, business model, social model, they are all completely unique. You cannot see anywhere. I'll give just one example from Tamil Nadu. In Tamil Nadu, all of us know central Tamil Nadu. In one locality or region, there are three important business centers, clusters. One is Namakkal, second one is Tiruchengodu, third one is Sangagiri. This Namakkal and Sangagiri, Tiruchengodu, they are within a radius of about 50-60 kilometers. If you take Namakkal and Sangagiri, these are the top two transport clusters of India. But in Namakkal, the business model is different. Most of them are sole proprietors. In Sangagiri, most of the businesses are partnership form of organization. Both are in the transport business only. And these two are the leading business transport clusters of India. When we went and dug out the reason, we found out that to buy a tanker lorry, the amount involved was comparatively less. So they chose the sole proprietorship model. When we go and see the transport cluster of Sangagiri, those people deal in large lorries which require more investment. So they go in for partnership. Can we believe that our people whom we call ordinary, they have this business sense? No business professor could have gone and suggested to them. Nearby center, Tiruchengodu at one time was dominating in the borewell industry. Even today they dominate, but at that time their share was almost 90%. So the whole of India. So when we studied them, we found out, again, partnership form of organization. Always one person was from outside the family, outside the relative circle. We were surprised. Normally in a business, there will be friends, close friends or close relatives. This is the usual pattern. But here we saw in all businesses, one outsider from different communities. Then we found out that when we asked them, we found out, sir, we are all operating in different parts of the country. Our businesses are in Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, Jammu Kashmir, etc. So always we remain out of our families for about 9 months in a year. Whenever there is a special occasion, whether it is marriage or some other occasion, we need to be here. If all of us are friends, all of us are relatives, then there will not be anybody to look after the business there. So we always consciously choose a person who is from outside our circle. Can we believe? And this is happening in India. And now these people, they are operating businesses in many of the African countries. Many of the African countries. In fact, they started with the borewell. Then they found out a machine that can go below the sea and then dig the land there. So this is the capacity of our people. So we have to understand that the Indian models are unique models. We have to recognize them. At least now we have to recognize it's our fortune now that we have a very government that emphasizes on Atmanirbhar Bharat. In fact, when the Prime Minister took over in 2014, in his first Independence Day address, he said, I am going to change the planning commission, because the then existing planning commission was based on Russian model, Stalin system. So he replaced it with the now with the Niti Aayog. If you have time, you please go and see the cabinet resolution that was passed to promote this Niti Aayog, which was established on January 1, 2015. It clearly says hereafter policies in India will be based on Bharatiya realities, no more copying and pasting. So as a result, now we have an understanding government, as a result of which these Indian models are flourishing. And that is the reason why Jandan scheme was introduced about 5-6 years back. People laughed at the government. But you know, now, after 6 years, there are 46 crore accounts. And in all their accounts, 1,59,000 crore of rupees are there as deposit. Can we believe it? Those people who were considered as very poor, they did not even have the money to open their bank accounts, but they have deposited 1,59,000 crores. 65% of them are women. So now at least we have to recognize it. Government is beginning to recognize it, and as a result, this Atmanirbhar Bharat is coming. Always, as you mentioned, India maintained her status as a self-employment nation. In Vidura Nidhi sage, Vidura said, self-employment is the best status. And even today, more than 45% of India is self-employed. And government is beginning to increase this number. And I strongly feel that India will flourish as a power and attain glory. Even now, it's glorious. It attain glory to the level that we accept in the years to come. There is no doubt at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, interestingly, I found that you spoken about kingless states and,
Yes.
India living safely because of its dharmic principles, and how so many Europeans and foreigners have documented, rightfully, like what you said, the knowledge in China, it was largely imported from India, from Fahain to other scholars who came in large numbers to Vikramshila or Nalanda.
Yes.
All these scholars came, collected books, copied them, and took them back to China. And China had, requested for people from our side to come there and settle down. Therefore, the country would become prosperous.
Yes.
So even for China to become such a big leader and overtake us in the second millennium, the first millennium of learning was from India. Any which way, India is rightfully, like what the Prime Minister has said, is the Vishwaguru. And this knowledge has been great and fantastic.
Yes.
Irrigation from 4500 BC, artificial reservoirs from 3000 BC, canal irrigation system from 2800 AD. All this predates the construction of pyramids in Egypt also.
Yes.
And no slavery in India. So many types of surgical instruments. There is a big list. I feel that we should, read this. Each one of the academicians in India should read this.
Yes.
Every economics department of all the universities and also the autonomous colleges in big number, at least first let them begin with this book. Let them read this and go to the other bigger book, Indian Models of Economy, Business and Management by Professor. and then take up all the related subjects. I think we need to, sir, I request you to take steps. We are all there to stand with you to
Yes.
start an Indian Business Institute, IBI. I think instead of waiting for let other people also follow this path, but let us see if we can create such an institution in Western Tamil Nadu, because you have abundant knowledge is there with you. You've written a number of books and articles, sir. Plus, you know the entire network of people who have contributed to this thinking in the last nearly 30 years. And that is a very big asset. And along with that, most of your academicians, you have a strength of those students who are found everywhere. You are the best people to, you are the best person to find these scholars, academicians, and through them, all their students and entrepreneurs. Why can't we think of setting up something like this?
Yes, yes. No, we will discuss. Now, fortunately, the government of India, after the introduction of new education policy, it emphasizes this IKS, Indian Knowledge Systems. Certainly, we will discuss about your suggestion. You know, as you rightly noted, that the reason for Indian economic system to function and flourish is we have a unique society set up. And yes, for the foreigners it was very something new to them. That is why they were astonished to see the kind of society that we had here earlier. I just saw, after you mentioned this, the quotation by Sir Charles Metcalfe, you know, who at that time was in charge of Tamil Nadu region also, the present Tamil Nadu region also. He was surprised to see the Indian society, village communities. You know, I have quoted him. It was in 1830. The village communities are little republics, having nearly everything they can want within themselves, and almost independent of any foreign relations. They seem to last where nothing else lasts. Dynasty after dynasty tumbles down. Revolution succeeds revolution, but the village communities remain the same. So this is the peculiarity, uniqueness of India. Of course, we have had even kingless states, because this is because the communities had the ability to maintain themselves. Even today, to a large extent, we can see this. Some of us have done research in this particular area also. Of course, I could not put everything here. You know, after tsunami attacked Tamil Nadu, we took up a study in the coastal regions of Tamil Nadu, from Thoothukudi and above up to Chennai. There is a community that is living along the coastal areas, fishermen. They are called Pattinavar community. In their community, even today in the 21st century, they have a system. Of course, they have panchayat system also, official system, but their tradition-based system. And in that system, they elect somebody who is a very respected senior person in the locality as Natar, what they call Natar. Natar is the senior leader, and it is he, along with the team, who decides everything. In fact, every month there is a regular meeting. All the persons who are above the age of 18, all the men, they are eligible to go and sit there. It is they who take the decision. You will be surprised to know that no cases go to police station by and large. Of course, in the recent years, there are some problems. And there are no divorce. The respect for women is such that every day the fisherman, before going into the sea, he touched the feet of his mother. And when I asked somebody, let us assume if you don't have mother, what will you do? He immediately, without waiting for a moment, said, sir, we touch the feet of our wives and then go to the Amman deity and then go to the temple. So this is how even today the system is maintained. The most important part is they have this self-dependent community system. You know, they have always in their localities 2-3 houses that is reserved. You know, whenever in a particular family, let us assume the elderly people have some dispute with their daughter-in-law or somebody, then they will go there and then live there for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. the entire family supports that elderly couple. And in that system, there is no owner laborer relationship. Some people own boats, others, work for them as a partner, not as an employee. Have you heard anything about it? And it is not just that. If somebody's boat is lost due to some reason, the entire village provides funds, buys a new boat, and then give it to him. Completely self sustainable village systems. Even today we have. Even if we say take the outer society, now we have about almost 6.5, 7 lakh settlements, villages, township, and all. But if you see the number of police stations in India, it's only about around 15,000. Can you believe that 7 lakh settlements in India are managed by police stations? In fact, most of the villages in India don't require police stations because they have disciplines. Dharma is guiding them. So even today, to a large extent, in spite of all the difficulties that we have, India remains as a self-functioning society to a large extent. And this is our greatness. This we have to nourish and then maintain.
Fantastic, sir. It was a very big revelation. And I really thank you for encapsulating the thought process into these 10 points or tiny paragraphs. For that will be the greatest takeaway for the audience. And since this is also going to be stored and circulated later with a number of people, they will use this as an important resource and composite thought process. And it is a truly revealing thing. And every time that even I listen to you, every time I think I have listened completely, but there is something new that you have been adding that shows that you are continuously enriching yourself and in return enriching all of us who know you. So no wonder that you are still continuously being regarded as not just as a teacher, but as a guru and a mentor. And we wish and pray to God that this continues for the years to come, and that more and more opportunities and chances come your way and in the way of all of us in order to enjoy the fruits of your thought process and your knowledge, sir. Thank you very much for being with the Veranda Club, sir. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Rajesh ji, and thank you for the Veranda Club friends. My only appeals is that Bharat is a great civilization. We have to recognize the functioning systems and try to nourish it so that India as a country will flourish. Ours is a great civilization, so we are the proud inheritors of this Bharatiya civilization. We have to recognize her potential functioning systems and then try to help building a great nation out of our strong fundamentals. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Vande Mataram.
Vande Mataram. Thank you.